All right, we're going to go ahead and get ready. My name's Felicia, and I'm here with my co-host Roxanne. We will be your IDEEIC room hosts. Welcome to Designing Preschool Environments Universally. Today's session will be recorded and shared through the Past Project YouTube channel in the coming weeks. This session is also live captioned. As I said earlier, we are having technical issues, so if you find the link in the chat box, you can view the closed captioning there. If you have a question, please type them into the chat box and we will share those with the presenters at the end of the session. Thank you so much. And also in order to earn RID/IIC CEUs, you will need a beginning and ending code for this session. The beginning code is preschool. Enjoy.
As Felicia mentioned, our beginning code is preschool. Rochelle and I wanted to welcome you to this webinar. Thanks for sharing your time with us today. Hopefully you've had a great morning, and we'll get right into this. Rochelle, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Rochelle. Thank you all for joining us.
Today, we are going to talk about UDL, Universal Design for Learning, the guiding principles, and what that might mean for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. We are also going to talk about some tools that you can utilize for students who are deaf and hard of hearing in the preschool setting. And we will also discuss current technology and what that means for students who are deaf and hard of hearing in the preschool setting. So we're going to have a introduction of Rochelle and I and our backgrounds in just a moment. We will talk about UDL and an overview of what that might mean. And I wanted to thank you guys for coming to this session that you were just in, if you were just in the session that I just had. So we're going to be talking about some of the same things, but more in depth on what that means for the preschool setting and for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. We do have question slides throughout this presentation to give us a little break. I know 90 minutes is a long time, especially in a Zoom meeting platform today. You're probably going to experience be really tired after today. Being on Zoom is something quite different than being in person. So we'll check for those question slides. You can also use the chat box whenever you have a question. We will have some breakout discussions at the end, and then we do have the evaluation for the conference. So to get started, we would love for you to locate the chat box, share your name, what districts you serve, if you are in different buildings, and what is your role. And if you have your Twitter handle, we would love for you to share that with us too, so we can connect with you and on social media. Another thing that I would love for you guys to add is how many years you have been serving students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Something that I'd like to take a moment today and celebrate your commitment to better outcomes for students, especially in this great state of Indiana. I know that there are people that have been working for many years and contribute a lot of great things. So we are excited to see the chat box and to interact with you guys. So we'll take a moment to look at that. Great, Jessica, thanks for coming from Ohio. It's nice that you didn't have to travel so far to get here today. And I'm seeing some people like Lindsay, we were at the deaf school together. Very cool. Hi everybody. Great, and who is admin? We can change your name for you so that we know who you are when you're, yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Okay, so while continue to keep interacting on the chat box, and I will introduce myself first. I am Katie Taylor. I'm part of the Patents Project as a specialist. I am specialist in the areas of deaf and hard of hearing and primary transition. And I joined the patents team 2 years ago. And prior to that, and I'm saying prior to that, but I'm still a licensed teacher of deaf and hard of hearing students in Indiana. Prior to that, I was out in school districts. I've been a statewide teacher of record for, at one point I had over 45 districts and a caseload of over 100 students. I've been itinerant teacher serving like 1 or 2 districts to itinerant teacher for 3 districts at a time, ranging, pre-K through 12th grade. I've also been a preschool teacher, which this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to do this presentation. I've had a lot to talk about preschool for a long time, and I'm so excited that Rochelle asked me to present this with her today. And I've also been at the high school level as a one-on-one language facilitator. So all kinds of different areas to pull experience from. Please feel free to either email me with questions after this webinar, or I'd love for you to get on Twitter and follow me, and I'll follow you back so that we can grow our professional learning network.
Hello, I'm Rochelle. I'm Rochelle Neal, and my first teaching position was a preschool position at Head Start, which I dearly loved, and had students with disabilities. And from there, I took a deaf ed position, and it was itinerant, and I had pre-K through high school, and then went to a resource room, and then to a school for the deaf, and then to college teaching. So have had a range of experience and am now at Ball State. I don't know what else. Oh, my research interest as it relates to our topic is deaf learners with disabilities and deaf learners with autism, and also those kiddos start out in early childhood, so thinking about UDL in those environments as well. And then this is a bit what got me into deaf ed, or Katie into deaf ed, or both of us into deaf ed? Katie, do you want to answer that first, and then I can?
Sure. Yeah, I can answer it first. That's a great question, Cindy. I got into deaf ed from when I was in elementary school. I really wanted to be in the PRIDE program, and I took that standardized test, and I couldn't get into the PRIDE program for some reason. Wink, wink. But I overheard that they were looking for peer students to go into the DHH classroom in the morning to be a peer, and I did that during 5th grade. Every morning I went into their classroom, and they taught me American Sign Language, and I made some really good friends. And you know, it seems like no matter which direction your life takes you, you always end up to where you're supposed to go. And so in high school, I wound back up at the elementary school shadowing the speech language pathology pathologist. And she said, I went to Ball State. I have a dual license in deaf ed and speech language pathology. So that's where I went.
Katie, where did you attend the EI school?
Oh, my elementary school is, I'm sorry, I'm up from.
Oh, elementary, sorry.
Yeah, I went to Plymouth. It was Washington Elementary School. That's up north by South Bend is where I grew up.
And do you know Cindy Gardner?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay, thanks. That was from Cindy McDonald. Okay, I was in, I think, 7th grade. I had, well, way back when we had special ed in, I think, the closets. I don't know. We did not have students with disabilities. You did not see them, and they were put away. So students who were deaf and hard of hearing, I had never seen sign language. I didn't know really anything about deaf students. I didn't know anything about students with disabilities. We didn't have students in wheelchairs. And when I was in high school, they just went to other schools, were bused to, they all went to schools in other districts. So while we had special education, it didn't look like it does today. So well, I like to think that it wasn't that long ago, and we did have IDEA. It was much different than it is now. So now, though, when my son is 20, when we took him to a school visit, when we went to look at the special ed room, it was way down at the end of the hall, kind of put out of the way, but it was in the neighborhood district. So, oh, that's, somebody has taught in a closet. I'm sorry. Yes, as itinerant teachers, I was an itinerant teacher, and you do have to be very flexible. So I went in 7th grade to a concert, and I saw my first interpreter, and began researching and learning more about sign language and deaf education. And because at that time I wanted to be a teacher, so my mom said, if you want to be a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, then you need to go and visit classrooms, because investing money into your college and what you want to be, then you need to know what it looks like and make sure. So when I got to be a sophomore in high school, my principal said it was okay. It was in the Kansas City district. It was a little bit away. Allowed me to go and volunteer 1 day a week in a school district to see if that was still an interest, and that's where I went. I went and got my elementary and early childhood degree at a small private college, so it was not in deaf ed, and then my master's at the University of Kansas in deaf ed. But I really wanted to go to Gallaudet University. I did not go there, but they had a job opening that said ASL preferred for one of their positions. After I had accepted a job and had received my PhD, so I applied, because I thought at Gallaudet, what does ASL preferred mean? And I accepted the position when it was offered, but I was sure for a long time after accepting and working there for a few weeks that they really hired the wrong person. And they would come and tell me that they had sent the email to someone, meant to send it to someone else. But I was there for 9 years, and I loved it. And it was a good experience. I learned a lot. And then now I'm at Ball State.
So we have a note from the interpreters that if you aren't using your video, to please turn off your video, so that we can save the space for the interpreters and the speakers.
And I forgot to tell you, like Katie said, you are welcome. This is kind of funny. You are welcome to email me any questions or to contact me via email. I have started, I meant to start this a long time ago, but I have started my my Twitter account. That's what it's called, right, Katie?
Yes.
And I only have 1 follower. and I'm not really sure how it works, but you're welcome to follow me and I will follow you back if I can I should be able to figure it out. But I did start that. So, but I recently started it, so I don't want you to think that like nobody likes me or anything. I just started it the other day. So, but you're welcome to email me and I will respond, and I look forward to talking to everyone.
And a note on that, Rochelle, I think just getting the name or the username is a start. And for me, I had the name for a long time, for years, and I didn't know what to do with it until I joined Patents. And we have Twitter chats every Tuesday night, not in the summer. We'll start back up in September, I believe. But every Tuesday night, we have a Twitter chat, and it's really fun. And you meet people from all over the world and get different ideas. So that's something that if you need help with it, go ahead and ask, and I'll show you. I also use a Chrome extension called TweetDeck. To help me follow all of the things. I don't do it on my phone, which is something that I didn't know existed either. So it's a lot more helpful if you can do it on your laptop. All right, great. Yes, Linda, there is captioning available. Felicia's gonna get you the link in just a moment so that you can have the closed captions. All right.
Okay, to get us started, we wanted to provide you with just a little bit of background information related to preschool to kind of set the tone for UDL and why it's important and how it kind of got started in preschools and the reason why we really need to think about it for the deaf kiddos, and just that background information to kind of get us started for today. So the thinking about the laws in special education, and the first in 1986, thinking about the Handicap in Children's Act and providing services for kiddos age 3, and thinking about the least restrictive environment and what exactly does that mean, and for the maximum extent possible, and is how can we get that to be their neighborhood preschools and around children with without disabilities. And then can we push in and provide the services that they need in those environments? And then related to, like, moving forward into IDEIA in 2004, ensuring that the states would be supportive in developing the early intervention plans and providing services for infants and toddlers. And so the thought was, it was the laws were saying that they would provide those, but would they actually provide those for the earlier years? Even before the age of 3. So that was quite a concern. And also before that was the federal mandates addressing the access to the general education, the general education curriculum for the children with disabilities. So how can we adapt the same curriculum for those kiddos so that they have access to the curriculum, but with the modifications that they need, and with those services so that they're not receiving something else. I'll give you just a second here. And this slide is looking at the participation and progress in the general education curriculum, making sure that the expectation is for all students, those with disabilities and those without disabilities, and making sure that both are held to high standards, that they both have access to a challenging curriculums, and they both are attaining the meaningful student learning outcomes. So, so that teachers are doing that for both students with and without disabilities, and then thinking about how can you do that in meaningful ways. And then really thinking about that last slide and thinking about it on this slide and thinking about the presentation today is that UDL incorporates all of that. So as we look at these laws and the expectations that were on that slide of the meeting those student learning outcomes, UDL, as we move forward throughout the presentation, helps ensure that teachers are able to do that. So,
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So I was just going to say on this slide that the expectations go beyond and encompass not just the Part B, but they move down and encompass Part C now as well. So to ensure that the children have access, so those children birth to 3 have access to learn those important concepts and skills that we expect of children who do not have disabilities. So making sure that those are provided in early childhood settings.
Yeah, I think that's very important to think about as we're moving into preschool settings, that we are thinking about what it looks like for other students who are typically developing and what it means for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing, that we really want to see them on par with their peers and working towards that. Okay, so we're going to take 20 seconds to take a breath. And if you guys have any questions, let us know. I know a lot of people have questions that they're putting in the chat box. But we did want to give a moment. If you wanted to turn on your camera to ask a question or use the chat box, please feel free to do that at this time. Hi, Linda. I see your question, and Felicia has put the link in the chat box for you. It's the streamtext.net link. Are you able to open that up? And I think Roxanne and Felicia can get you set up. Hi, Felicia. Okay, I can see that she's working on that. Linda, let us know. So we wanted to do a little activating the background knowledge of universal design for learning. So I do have a Mentimeter poll that I'd like for you guys to try out with me. You can do this on your phones. If you have an iPad or a smartphone out right now, you can open up the camera. Don't take a picture, but hover over the QR code on the screen. And as you do that, a little link should pop up at the top of your screen on your device that you're using. And you can click on that link and it will open up the poll for you. I'm going to go out to the poll and I can also put this in the chat box as well. So you can use it on the device that you are on Zoom with, if you'd like. One second. There we go. Okay. That should work for you if you want to do it that way. And then I will show you what it looks like on my screen in just a second. Yes, Cindy, I always love to model some different tools and have you practice during the webinar. so that you can take these back to your class or your students or however that looks for you and try them out with your students. So this is a free website, mentimeter.com. And right now I'm doing a presentation slide with it. So you can also go to menti.com and use the code 542591 and select some words so the idea is what is the first thing you think about when you think of UDL? What are the things that you can, it brings to mind when you think about UDL? Maybe you're not very familiar with it, and that could be something that you say as well, like you need more training or more ideas or collaboration. But I do see some words right now that are really awesome. And I also want to bring attention to, it's where I'm at, it's sunny, and I always feel better when it's sunny outside. So I see equal access, all, everyone, equitable,
inclusive.
Very cool. This is so neat. So as everybody is putting in their words, it's changing and getting bigger. Diverse learners. I tell you what, that's one of the myths that I think we've been fed to probably our whole lives until we realize that there are no average learners. Everyone is diverse. Our brains are everybody's brain is so uniquely different that we have to plan for all kinds of different students and abilities. Understanding and beautiful. Awesome. Individualized. Very cool. You know, I just saw, I don't know where it went, but I just saw the word music. And that is something that I've been thinking about for a while now with music. So if you're the one that put music, can you give us some more in the chat box what you were thinking? I have some ideas that I'm not going to share today, but I think it's something very cool and neat that we can do with music. Hi, Cindy. So yes, what we're seeing on the screen right now, you should be seeing it move, and those are other people's responses. Very cool. Okay. It hasn't moved in a second. Maybe we're done. Very cool. Oh, no problem. Okay. Very neat. Well, I wanted to activate, our prior knowledge of universal design for learning. And maybe you don't have prior knowledge of it, so that's perfectly fine. I'm glad that you're here today. So I would like to talk about ESSA, ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act, was signed in 2015. And this is a federal act that talks about education, and the graphic that you're seeing here, we lovingly call this the bagel or the donut. And hopefully you've seen it and it's something that you're kind of bored of seeing already. I don't know. But I would love to talk about it because this graphic is, it took the state of Indiana, the Department of Education, 2.5 years to come up with this graphic. And so they worked really hard on it. And I think it's really good when we dive into it and really talk about it. So I'm just going to describe it very briefly, but one of the things I wanted to mention about ESSA, that Every Student Succeeds Act, is that universal design for learning is right up here at the top. So I was introduced to UDL more than 10 years ago now. I know I didn't learn about it in college, but once I had my first job, they introduced it to me. And I have to tell you that I didn't know how to implement it. Like, I got the idea, but I really didn't hear much more about it until just, maybe 2 to 3 years ago. So it's not something new. It's not a trend. It's not going away. So it's really something that we should start thinking about and implementing different ways. So as we go down to the bottom, something that you're probably very familiar with is multi-tiered system of supports. So MTSS is something that schools talk about all the time. So if you're not doing UDL, then you're probably more doing MTSS. So as we go inward on the graphic, collaboration, instruction, assessment, curriculum, then we're going to go into the middle of this, where we have a shared responsibility. And this kind of middle of the circle, I really would like to explain it in a way that general education and special education in UDL, the lines are blurred. We can't tell who's in special ed, who's in gen ed. We're all in it together. And especially the teachers are more collaborative and reaching all students and working together. So thinking about that shared responsibility, they're not your students, they're not my students, they're our students type of thing. We have high expectations, which Rochelle talked about that earlier, that we need to have those high expectations for all students, even when they have disabilities. And shared accountability, just like what I said, they're not your students, they're not my students, or, they're not, we don't go out in the hall type thing. We are working together, and the data reflects both of our teaching and our abilities with our students. So the big outcome, the big thing to get out of this is equity plus access equals greater outcomes. So we want to make sure that we have equitable access, opportunities for our students, and that we're given access. And as we know, for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing, this is huge in language access to the curriculum in the classroom. And you can find this graphic and more information on the Indiana DOE website, and the link is here for you. Rochelle, did you have anything to add to this one? Okay. So when I was introduced to UDL, you might have seen some different pictures like this. And this is, I'm always trying to find the most simplest, concrete way to remember something. And UDL, and when I'm trying to explain to educators on the thinking behind it, is our older buildings have ramps like this. And it's not pleasing to the eye, it's out of the way. We have to retrograde things. So think about our classrooms this way, and our buildings and our lesson plans, and just the way that we go about educating our students in our classroom. Typically, we have a lesson plan that, either we get from a book or we create from our own content. And we create it before we meet our students, right? So right now, teachers aren't getting paid during the summer, but they are for sure thinking about their lessons that they're going to plan out, and probably preparing materials for them. But what happens is that they, and I'm guilty of this too. So when I say they, I really mean me and other people as well. So what happens is that you create these lessons plans before you meet your students, and you haven't thought about who your students are. And you won't know until you meet them, right? Or you get their IEPs, which might be an hour before they walk in the door. And so then we're creating ramps. And these ramps are accommodations which are very needed, but sometimes they're in the back of the building, right? So if you look at an older building, sometimes the ramp there's no ramp in the front of the building. And students have to go in the back, or staff as well have to go in the back if they need the ramp. So now we're going to talk about universal design for learning, and the way that it looks and operates in your classrooms is that we are planning for those students, for every type of student, in our lesson plans while we're working over the summer, or however you're doing that on the beach, or however it looks for you. We are developing our plans with every student in mind, and that looks like this picture, where the ramp is integrated into the steps. And the most beautiful thing about this is that who uses the ramp in this picture? Who uses it? Is it just for students with wheelchairs or crutches?
Skateboarders, the strollers.
Yes, skateboarders.
Bicycles.
And bicycles. I love that. I really love that you just said skateboarders, because I would love to see that. And people are commenting, everyone is going to use that ramp. I wonder how many people actually use the stairs. And so delivery people, yes. So the awesome part about this is that, and you'll see this once you start thinking about it in our everyday lives, is that there was a need for something, that people integrated it, and then everyone said, wow, I need that. Everyone said that. Just like everyone said, wow, I'd rather text than call somebody. I don't know about you, but if it's not planned and somebody starts calling me, I kind of freak out a little bit. So texting was something for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. That wasn't something universal, but look at it now. No one wants to call. Everyone wants to text. And that's the same thing with this picture. Once you integrate something out of a need, there are lots of people that would just love to cartwheel up this ramp instead of walking up the stairs.
That's what some of the other things, whenever I'm teaching about universal design, I have the students think about other things that they see in the environment. And one of the things is, I know like some of the grocery stores in Kansas City will have a picture next to the word. And some of the grocery store have the pictures, the word, and the word in Spanish. Well, I can send my kids before they could read and say, okay, I'm on this aisle. You need to go pick up the milk. And they could quickly look up there, find the picture, and go get the milk and come back to me. Or an adult who's a non-reader could go in and grab the milk. Or I could look up there and quickly find it without having to go, okay, the milk, the cheese, the dairy, and go shopping a little bit quicker down the aisles. So there's other things in our everyday lives that we take advantage of that we aren't thinking about. Or when we teach our kids to first use the microwave and everybody's like, popcorn button and start. Or when you're looking at computer games and Clifford's shaking his head yes and no, and they're learning how to read and click the no button, and they can hover over it and Clifford's going, so they know to click that button instead of the yes. Some of those simple things for kids that can read and not read, they're able to get those things. One of the things that doesn't seem to be quite a universal design is when we go to the start button to shut down our computer, but that's a little difficult since it's not the right words or the right picture, but
yeah, I can never figure out what is the dash mark and the circle. What does that mean? On, off? I'm not sure. Great. And I also have seen a picture, and I'm sorry I didn't include it today, but there's a meme that has kids going upstairs or up a ramp, and there's a guy trying to shovel off the stairs, and there are people waiting. And the meme says, if you would just shovel off the ramp, everyone could go up and do that first, and then you could go ahead and do the stairs. So it's very interesting, different mindsets. Okay, so UDL in your classroom, and like I said, I always like to sum things up in one word, or the most simplest way to pack it in my brain. And I have a brain that kind of doesn't like to file things in the right area. It kind of looks like a laundry basket that's kind of not folded, and I have to dig through it. So the smaller things I can get into my brain are the better. And so when I think about UDL in our classroom, the one word that I would like to offer you guys is options. We are going to try to provide as many options as we can. So that's the multiple and being flexible ways of allowing our students to engage in their environment and learn. And representation is ways that you are providing your content. And then action and expression is providing ways and options for students to show you what they know, which can be very exciting. And especially at the preschool age, is so fun to celebrate their moments of learning, and when they finally show you, that they are learning some language, or learning a concept that you've spent all week on, or even longer. So it's very exciting to celebrate, especially at the preschool age. I really miss working with preschool students. And if you need more information on UDL, CAS.org is the national organization that puts out content about UDL. So please feel free to go there. They have tons of graphics and information there for you. Okay, so is everybody familiar with this graphic? You might be familiar with these two pictures here. I'm going to briefly describe them just so you can understand what I'm getting at with the boxes. Oops, sorry, with the boxes. And then I'm going to talk more about this last picture that you might not be as familiar with. The left-hand picture, there's boxes. This is what you would equate to a classroom where everything is fair. Everyone has the same accommodations. Everybody gets the same tools. It's kind of, you're seeing, and as I point out, the different students, they have different needs, and everybody getting the same tool or the same accommodation really is not meeting the students where they are and what they need. So we have a taller student who obviously didn't need the box to begin with, so they didn't need that tool. And the middle child, he got the tool, it's what he needed, he is awesome, he's good to go to view the baseball game. This other child is smaller, and he got the box, but it's not enough. So this is an example of, being fair and equal tools, and everybody gets what they get. It's just not meeting the unique needs of the students. We're going to move into the middle picture, where this is a classroom which is moving in the right direction, where we have equitable accommodations, which means that it's not equal, it's not fair, everybody gets what they need. So we have accommodations based on individual need, which is awesome. Each student now has the ability to view the game and participate, and everybody's cheering and having a great time. We're going to take that a step further, and I want to draw your attention to this wooden fence here. And this can represent different barriers in the classroom that are presented. And if you can think of and add to the chat box any unique barriers for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing that are in the classroom in preschool settings, what are the barriers that you see that they are coming across? And these are barriers that are typically in the classroom, and that we are giving accommodations for. And so I'm really trying to stretch your thinking here in how do we just remove those barriers so we don't need these accommodations, which can be very scary if I'm saying that and you're like saying, whoa, 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 you can't take away children's accommodations. You're right. I don't want to take away any accommodation. But when we talk about UDL, we're talking about accommodations that are just available for students to choose, and they don't seem like they're being picked on by the adults and they get this special thing where other students don't. So we're going to take away this wooden barrier and replace it with this chain link fence. This is what UDL is: removing the barriers and allowing the students to view the game and participate as they are. They may need an accommodation and they can go get that, or they can just use it, or it's built into the lesson plan and it's not something extra that we need to plan for. It's just there. We've already planned for it at the beginning and everybody knows where those tools are to go get them and to just use them. And it's something very cool when we are open to this flexibility.
It would be like the ramp or the words in the grocery store. I'm a mom and the ramp wasn't built for me, but I'm going to take advantage of it because I have all of my bags and my stroller and it makes it easier for me. Or I'm a skateboarder and it's just fun. So I'm just going to use it today. So even though I'm the tall kid, I might want to just have access to it today and use it, even though my teacher didn't plan it for me, but it's there and I can use it today and it will benefit me and help me with my lesson.
Right. And, I'm seeing daily where students aren't eligible for the accommodations. However, they do benefit from them. So if you can think about it in that way, when we provide these tools, that there are students that aren't eligible for them, but they would benefit from them. It's something to think about. We're not excluding the other way for students that aren't eligible. Lori, I saw your comment that if a teacher has a mic on or using assistive technology, I think you're saying that the students miss what the other kids are saying. And it depends on what technology you're using, but there's ways to change the mic settings so that you're 50-50 of 50 environmental sound and 50 the teacher mic that she's using. So we can talk about that too, but there's at another time if you want more specifics on how to do that, and usually involves your managing audiologist. Okay, so they might lose the location of where the sound's coming from, and there are ways to work on that as well. Lindsay, I see using sign language for nonverbal hearing students as well as DHH students. Yes. And Lindsay, I'm so glad that you're here because I'm going to talk about you a little later. Not you specifically. I wasn't going to name you, but we'll get to a situation a little later that I'm happy that you're here today. Okay, so I have another question for you guys. When we're thinking about preschool, and now that we've talked about UDL and activated your prior knowledge, and we're all here for the sake of students who are deaf and hard of hearing, what are we thinking the outcomes? Like, why would we do this? Why would we think about UDL and our students who are deaf and hard of hearing in the preschool setting? What are we hoping to get out of this? So you can use the chat box to come up with ways that might be beneficial. Okay, I'm going to go on. Lori, I see hoping for progress at the rate of non-hearing of typical students using ASL. Hi, Renee. Nice to see you. Tammy, hi. Increased vocabulary, inclusion for all students. Michelle, appropriate placements with necessary accommodations for students who can learn and thrive. And Renee is saying that she uses ASL with APD. Can you tell us what APD, auditory processing disorder, I believe? Let me know if I'm correct. So using ASL for different reasons as well. Okay, so I had a couple words that came to mind, and you guys kind of hit on these as well. So that buzzword that's going around right now, inclusion. We want to increase our outcomes. We want to benefit from the placement that we're in. So great, you guys mentioned placement as well. And I think we've said it maybe 10 times so far, but high expectations for our students. We want to make sure that for every other student, we have the same expectation for all the other students. Rochelle, did you have more to add to this one?
No, I think that covers everything.
So many benefits. We have another questions, so feel free to ask questions. Maybe you're questioning, yeah, but how does that work? Or what, maybe there's different things that are popping up in your, while you're thinking and processing this. So please let us know. Okay, so we're gonna get in some tools or different things that we'd love for you to have access to and take back with you. So as I was thinking that we are working from, many times when you're thinking about preschool, we're thinking about that first initial intake to the school setting from birth to 3. This doesn't matter, and I'm not talking about, if they had birth to 3 services or if they didn't. I'm just saying that initial intake process. And I wanted to draw your attention to, so I mentioned that I've worked in many school districts, and Indiana seems to have a unique situation where, and I'm sure most of you have felt this in some capacity, that there have been co-ops in the state of Indiana where possibly a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing has covered many districts. And in recent years, districts have decided to pull away from those cooperative agreements. And that is leaving unique challenges and unique, and this is not unique, that we're having teacher shortages in the area of deaf and hard of hearing license. That's not really unique to the state or to the nation. However, I think the way that the cooperatives are breaking up and that districts are trying to find their own teachers, I think that's somewhat unique to Indiana. And people from Alabama and Ohio, please let me know if that is, maybe you are having similar things come up like that. However, in Virginia as well. So one thing that I would like to show you, and I thought that this eased some of the concerns that I was having. There might be various reasons why this is happening, but I was witnessing that I would be, as a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, I would be invited to the actual case conference after the evaluation happened to be added to the IEP. I wasn't invited to the intake process. I wasn't invited to the evaluation. So all of those things that need to happen to be eligible for deaf and hard of hearing services weren't there initially, and it was kind of a retrograde thing. So I wanted to bring your attention to this document, and this is in the Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Education, their assessment guidelines. In the back, there's an appendix called the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Evaluation Delegation Sheet. So I thought this would be helpful for everyone if you gave this to the preschool coordinator or the assistant director of special ed, whoever is in charge of coordinating those meetings for intake and for the evaluation process. This helps it helps the team realize the different things when we're considering eligibility for deaf and hard of hearing, the different things that are needed for the IEP process. And it also helps you delegate who is going to do those. So I know I've been stuck in situations where I've been told to go ahead and generate consent for evaluation, and the school psychologist didn't know that I had done that, or the speech language pathologist didn't know that she needed to do language, expressive and receptive components of the IEP or of the evaluation, or just different things that weren't really something that everybody was used to, because they used to be part of the co-op, that the co-op handled that, and now individual districts are handling this. So I think this is a really valuable sheet that you can take back to your districts and utilize for that reason, and not just for preschool students, for all students, but something that is useful. Let me know what you guys think about that. Okay, on to talking about transition and doing those IEP meetings and talking about developing the IEP. We wanted to just bring a little attention to discussing available placement options. This isn't something that when I first started out, this wasn't really something that I knew. And it's something that we really need to focus on when we have, and sometimes we need to talk to our directors or whoever is managing the meeting to make sure that they know that you're going to bring up this with the parents, and that it's something important to discuss for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So we just need to make sure that everyone discusses the availability and the options of different placements. For our students who are, for all students, but especially for our students in preschool, that there are option schools, there are developmental preschools that are typically held at the local level, the state schools, like the Indiana School for the Deaf. Community placements are something great, really great to explore. And then another option would be, if you don't have something locally, and maybe the state or option schools aren't something that's available, neighboring districts have a lot of options that you can be a part of and pull into. So I know I was part of a district that would, with a neighboring district, we would bus some kids there for their really great program that we just didn't have available in my district that I worked in. So are there other placement options that you can think of that I didn't put on this slide? And I know Cindy talked about this as well, or she asked the question earlier of placements in developmental preschool options, that sometimes our students with hearing loss, they get placed in that option because that's what's available at the local level. And it's just kind of something that we need to explore, that if that really meets their needs, or if they need to be more of in a community-based placement. Laura, I love that. I didn't think about doing the virtual school option. So that's going to be very unique this coming school year. I know my school district just today put out a survey saying, are you going to select virtual or are you going to select in person? So at the preschool level, that's definitely very unique. And Rochelle, I know you talked about the Head Start placements, or I know Heidi just mentioned the Title I pre-K.
And Head Start has so many, like some families might not qualify because it's income based, but they have so many spots that are reserved for students with disabilities. And so their program, if it would be a good fit, the student might qualify based on the disability, not the income status, and then they would be able to receive services there, and the whatever services would be able to go into the classroom and provide services in the classroom setting.
Great. One more thing I wanted to talk about, not one more thing, this is the last thing, but in regards to the IEP meetings and your discussions, thinking about least restrictive environment. And this is something that I saw, think about for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing, think about that language switching to language-rich environment. So which environment will have the best language-rich environment for that particular student? And of course, you know that that is completely case by case for every student that we serve, because everybody functions and does things differently. But we also want them to have peers with typically developing language. And that's kind of my overarching goal of talking about different placements, is that we want to make sure that we meet the needs of the student with their language needs. And we always want our students to have that peer interaction that is typical developing language. And I know Rochelle and I talked about this, and I've always in my mind thought that I would like for the student to be exposed to as much language as possible throughout the week, as many hours, as much input that we can get. And to me, I think about that full day and full week for language development. And, you know, when I was discussing this with Rochelle, she brought up a great point, and I said, oh, yes, of course, I thought about that. I mean, I've done that in the past. I haven't thought about it recently. But she talked about being creative to achieve full day, full week for language development. Rochelle, do you want to talk about that?
I'm not sure what our discussion was and how I said to be creative about it, but I do know, like, some of our placements we thought about, or some of our IEPs, and I think our discussion was like half day at the School for the Deaf, half day at Head Start, or Tuesday, Thursdays would be full days in one environment, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe in a church daycare setting. Whatever would be the other best placement option, depending on what the child's needs were. So if you were thinking ahead to what kind of kindergarten were you wanting, and where is the student at right now? So if you're working towards a mainstream classroom in kindergarten, but right now you're in a special ed classroom of 6 or 7, and you're going to be transitioning to a classroom of 20 in kindergarten, where should you be moving towards? So maybe a half a day of preschool that looks a little bit similar to the kindergarten option, with some supports in there. So trying to find something that would look a little similar. One thing I wanted to go back to Katie's number 1 point on the language-rich environment, and I just wanted to add that you could have a thinking about like a Head Start classroom, for example, a language enriched environment with, you could have 2 Head Start classrooms going into those classrooms to observe. They could look very different. So going in and seeing, okay, this classroom has the materials labeled, this classroom, the teacher understands what it means to have peer modeling and play and video modeling, and really showing the students language and how to develop language. This teacher is a little more, there's language in the classroom, language happening, but it's not as much modeling and not as much reading books and showing and the visual language. There's not as much on the pictures on the wall describing. And so just thinking about, there's two classrooms in the same place, but they both might not be adequate for a deaf learner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I was also thinking that when we discussed this, Rochelle, you were talking about that the full day, full week for language development doesn't always need to be, or sometimes it can't be reflected in the IEP service minutes, but that we can work with parents and help them achieve this through community preschools that maybe they do on their own, or different ways to kind of be creative about that. Because sometimes, and I'm seeing in the chat box there, you're right, there are some times where transportation's an issue. There are some times where, you know, there's just the capacity and those placements are full, and we run into some of those issues. But think about it in a creative way. And Rochelle, you said something about, you know, when your son was in preschool, looking at different options so that there was that full day for language and an interaction with peers.
Exactly. He went to Head Start as a child with a disability, and then he had his preschool through the school district. So the school helped to set that up. His preschool, his Head Start teachers went to the IEP meeting, but none of his services were provided through Head Start. But they did go to the IEP meetings. They did provide input. His school did provide input on like community activities, like soccer, different things and things that he should work on there, but they didn't go to those kind of events or provide services there, but it was helpful. So those kind of things for deaf and hard of hearing kids, to get them into extracurricular activities that would be meaningful and get them language and get them into different things that would help to get them ready for kindergarten and help with language would also be a creative way.
Yeah, great. Okay, I would like to talk a little bit about assistive technology and something, you know, in per IDA as well. In every case conference, we must consider if assistive technology is needed for each student who has a disability. And sometimes this isn't part of our initial evaluations. And I wanted to give something for you guys to take back and digest and think about adding this to your intake referrals and for a process. So, and I know that in another session, they're talking about the optimizing guidelines for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So that's where this is coming from, NASD SE, the NASD most recent guidelines that were put out. In Chapter 6, you're going to look at school environment access and accommodations. And I'm going to scroll down, and it talks about universal design for learning for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So you guys are going to be pros at this. But one thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is this SET framework. And this is centered around student, environment, task, and tools. And I want you to notice that the tools are last, and that's for a reason. But this is framework for you to go through to assess what assistive technology is going to be useful through your trial basis for your students who are deaf and hard of hearing. And there is a place on the IEP for assistive technology and training for the student, teacher, and family on that almost last page by the accommodations in the services. So I wanted you, and we can't spend that much time on this, but I wanted you to be aware of this, that it is there, and pull it out and think about using that. If you need more help, please let me know. And the team at Patents can definitely work with you. As well as the Patents team has the lending library that I help make sure that it's current and viable for you guys, so that you can borrow things for your 6-week loan while you're doing your evaluations. So let me know if you need more information on that. Another thing I'd like to talk about assistive technology with our preschool setting is that a few years ago, we've been saying for a long time that our students who are in preschool do not use FM yet, or FM or DM, which is this assistive technology for those students who are using devices to learn to listen and speak, or just have environmental awareness with their devices. There is newer technology now, which is Roger, and that company that has that out is Phonak. And so I have linked here a few links for more information on the products that they have, and the reasons why they are promoting this technology for students who are so young. Where a few years ago we would say that the student's not able to report yet if the device is functioning, so we're not going to use this this technology. We would also say that the student needs to know how to communicate that there's interference. While these skills are still important and we should still work on them, it's not a reason to delay access to assistive technology. And in fact, Phonak is now giving these devices, and when I say giving, I'm not really saying they just give them at no cost. I'm sure there's a hefty cost. But these are being promoted more for home use, especially in the preschool younger ages, for car use and sports, and like Rochelle mentioned, the grocery store and those types of environments. These are being heavily promoted. And so having access to these at school is going to be encouraged more and more. And I talked about Roger technology. It's newer technology, and that's where the DM comes from. That's digital modulation, and that's different from our old FM. So FM is old, and it uses radio technology, and there was a bunch of interference. Roger technology doesn't have that. It's always seeking the best signal, and it doesn't have that interference or that buzz. You might have some issues, but they're very limited and not occurring like that anymore, like they used to. I did want to just briefly mention that we want to make sure that we're front-loading services for our students so that they don't have to have tons of services when they're older. We want exposure to language, and it doesn't matter what language, preferably multiple languages. And I have some links here for language deprivation syndrome, which is being talked about more and more. And here's a really nice video if you wanted to show and explain it to maybe parents or other staff members what language deprivation is, a really nice visual representation of that. This one by Dr. Galati, it's over an hour long, but it's so good. It's got great information in it. So I encourage you to take a moment and look at that on your own time. UDL talks a lot about physical environment. So we want to make sure that and that's huge in preschool environments, right? It's usually all about physical environment setup and how students are going to interact with peers and their materials, because at this age, it's all about play and learning through exploration. So we just want to make sure that we have those basic acoustic setups where we have carpeting, we have things on the wall to help absorb the noise that could be vibrating off the walls. If you have cinder block or that type of setting, you want to be very careful that you have acoustic tiles, or even I've had my preschool classroom had extra above the tile ceiling. They had extra a couple inches installed of the blown-in insulation to help with the noise that was happening in that classroom. Seating, I know all teachers love kidney-shaped tables, but you could also just make sure that every setting you have a U-shaped in chairs or the way that they're sitting on the floor. So just think about settings that way, and having sight lines across the room open so that your bigger things are across the room from, like the big bookshelves and that type of thing, aren't blocking views, that they're pushed up against the walls, and it's easier to navigate that way, and students can easily, look around if they're trying to track people using sign language or an auditory signal. So engagement and representation at the preschool level, they kind of really go hand in hand, because we're engaging and we have that content in a different way than in like an elementary classroom. And so think about choice making for all activities, giving them choice and pulling that language out of them. Do you want to go to the reading corner, or would you like to do writing, or giving them options of those different centers that are open at this time, and having them tell you, right now, first I'd like to do writing, and then I'd like to do something, wherever their language level is at, but helping pull those, that language out while you're giving them some choices. And Rochelle, would you like to talk about what happens when you give that availability of choice?
When you start in the preschool or starting early, just helps to give students and start working on that self-determination and self-advocacy skills early, which you're going to start helping them to work through and become a part of the IEP process later. And making their own choices is something that you're going to start working on later, and advocating for themselves and what services they need. So by giving them choices early in activities, you're starting to work on those skills.
Which is huge, right? Because that's usually our must-have in our IEPs for goals and things that we need to address. So definitely something to think about there in how we're presenting our materials or the content to our students. Real life visuals, if you're talking about a concept, try really, really hard to not just have like a play, something childish, or, it needs to be appropriate for their age level, but try as much as you can to have the real thing, whether it's a video or so that it's not like cartoonish type thing, so that they can get the real feel of what you're thinking about, what you're trying to get across. Sometimes, we need to be very concrete about our things that the concepts that we're trying to teach. And so real life visuals or manipulatives would be very helpful for our young learners. Closed captioning, I think sometimes we get into this, well, they can't read yet, so why would I give them closed captioning? But studies have shown, and we've seen it in progress, where when we give access to closed captioning and words, printed words on the walls. It's very, very beneficial. And, you know, our students aren't picking up things incidentally like typical learners. So having the closed captioning on is great for reading. It's great for if our students are trying to learn to listen and speak, it's great for that. It's great for multiple languages as well. Maybe they have Spanish at home and they're trying to learn English too. And having printed English words on the wall with pictures is something that's really, really helpful. Visual schedules with words and pictures in the order that you're going to do them help as well. I mean, not just our students who are deaf and hard of hearing, but all the students. So thinking about that. And then
on the visual schedules, one thing, well, like with any of the others as well, but one teacher had hers, this is just an example, like printed on a train. So she had enough room to have 2 trains, the morning class and the afternoon class, so AM, PM, and did the whole visual schedule long way. So it was helping the students get their eyes going from left to right, left to right. To get the reading, their eyes going, that pre-reading skill. Some classrooms don't have enough room to do that, so they have to go more vertical. So just thinking about if you have enough room and where your students are with their pre-literacy, so that you can think about how you want your visual schedule set up in your classroom.
Perfect. My last comment that I wanted to make on this, which is something that is, you know, we're talking about a lot right now in general, cultural and disability inclusion in our classrooms. But think about that we must include these materials for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Representation is something so huge. They have to see others growing up and succeeding just as much as we all do. And so we need to make sure that we have those cultural things in place for them. And I'm not just talking about, you know, their race and their culture from their home, but I'm talking about deaf culture. Seeing, you know, the dolls that they're playing with in the classroom, they have, you know, whatever technology that they have, as well as, sorry, I just lost my thought here. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I just found a new Netflix show that's called Feel the Beat. And I just watched it yesterday so that I could tell you guys all about it. And the representation in that one, it has a little girl who is part of the dance team who uses a sign language, and all of the kids are learning it. And at first I didn't like it because the main character, you know, said some things, and I'm like, oh wait, no, she's treating all of the kids that way. It's not just the girl who is deaf. And then at the end, it all comes around and it's beautiful. Making sure that we have videos and materials that are inclusive of their language, of their race, of their disability, all of those things. Okay, so we are running close on time. So I want to talk about this, and you guys feel free to continue to chat about it like you are in the chat box. This is the last one, and the one thing that I wanted to talk about for preschool setting for action expression, this is the last principle of UDL, and my challenge to you is that at this level, and at any level really, but I want give options for students to tell you what they know. And sometimes, and a lot of times, we run out of time. We have, you know, one time for the student, maybe not one time, but we have one way for them to show us how they know things on like the I*STAR-KR assessment type thing. And, you know, maybe we watch them in another setting, but I want to challenge you to find 5 ways for that student to show you what they know about that certain topic that you are assessing them. and sometimes that can be very challenging. And Rochelle came up with the idea of the task of counting to 5. When you're assessing children, can they count to 5? So we want to give that challenge to you. Can you come up with 5 different ways that a student can show you that they can count to 5?
And Katie and I, when we decided this, we also had to think about, is it rote counting? Is it one-to-one correspondence? So when you think about your 5-way challenge, making sure that each one was the same. So when you were assessing the outcome, were they the same in the end? So that became a little bit of a challenge too.
Okay, so I want you to keep thinking about this and feel free to chat about it in the box. But we are going to move on since we only have 4 minutes with you. I was so appreciative of you guys sticking with us for the full 90 minutes and discussing things. We were having a great discussion in the chat box. And Lindsay, I'm sorry, I told this at the beginning that I was going to talk about your our awesome consult that we did with you and your student and the other teachers in your classroom. But if you have, many times you have tried everything you can think of. And there's different things that you can try: low, medium, high technology, and AAC, alternative and augmentative communication. There's lots of different things that teachers try. And sometimes you feel like you've tried everything, you don't know what to do. And that's where you can reach out to your Indiana resource networks at no cost to you guys. We are here to consult with you. So I'm part of the Patents Project, and you can absolutely reach out to anybody at the Patents Project, and we will get together and collaborate and consult with you and come up with some really cool solutions. So one of the solutions that I wanted to talk about, and I'm just going to spend 1 minute on it, but there was a student who was on the spectrum, who had a hearing loss, who needed to attend to an interpreter in the classroom to receive the language. It was found that the student wasn't attending because they had that social concern of attending to a physical person. So we came up with using live feed cameras and iPads. And I believe, Lindsay, we also talked about using AAC as well for communication to help bridge the gap of expression of language. But there are some out-of-box things that you could try just by consulting with some people from the Indiana Resource Networks, and Patents is one of them. So there's a link to all of the Indiana Resource Networks on that slide. There are some handouts that are available on Sketch for this webinar, but I also wanted to talk that you had links here. So this is a UDL lesson plan creator on the Patents website that will help you walk through the steps to begin thinking about creating your lessons in a universal design way. This isn't meant to put all of your lesson plans through this, because it will be time consuming at first, but once you get the idea, you don't need to use this plan creator anymore. But you can go ahead and try, and you can give this to other teachers as well. And it once you do it, it's like a Google form, and it will email you back a really nice lesson plan that you can go off of as well. This second one is a poster I created that you can print out and have in your classrooms or hand over to, the gen ed teachers that you're working with. And I'll show you what that looks like real fast. So this is something that you can print out and has some tips for including our students who are deaf and hard of hearing. This isn't inclusive. I mean, it is inclusive, but it's not totally geared towards preschool, but it gives you some ideas and for some other teachers to take back to the classroom. Okay, it looks like we are out of time.
Oh, one other thing real quick. Katie has an article coming out on this topic in the Odyssey, And then she and I will have an article coming out. I'm not sure when the Odyssey comes out, in the fall.
I
Is that
think
what the last email said?
September, I think.
In September. And then we have one coming out on the same early childhood UDL topic, but we're not sure when that one's coming out. But we have one coming out later. But she does have one coming out soon in the Odyssey.
Yes,
All right.
thank you. I'm so excited for those. Go ahead, Felicia.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Rochelle Neild and Katie Taylor. This concludes our session. Please complete the evaluation to receive your professional growth points or RID and IIC CEUs and to be entered into a prize drawing at the end of the conference. The evaluation link can be found on Sketch or the QR code on the screen. The ending code for RID and IIC CEUs is teacher. To leave this session, click the Leave Meeting button on the bottom corner of your screen. The next session in here is goal writing for students who are deaf and hard of hearing if you want to remain on the line. Thanks.